For the fifth episode of the Those Who Design series, I'm very glad to invite Rajesh Dahiya, the founder of CoDesign, who's also a very dear friend, whom I've known for many years now. We know his prolific work with Royal Enfield, PhonePe, Seva Trust, and Godrej Script, among others. I have myself had the opportunity to work with Rajesh on a few projects across genres. Today, I look forward to discussing the lens with which Dahiya looks at graphic and communication design and the transformative impact this craft can have, especially for products, services, and brand identity in India. I welcome him as a part of this exciting series and thank him in advance for his insights and his time.
When we were taught in school, we were always looking at, what is this transformative impact of design, beyond, let's say, form and function. Someone famous said, it is not how it looks, it's how it works, right? So with this specific lens of, brand identity, graphic design, I wanted to get your approach to design thinking and how you look at it or how you think about it.
I think when the design practice is looked at as only as an outcome of form, which is also the old school way of looking at it. But systems design actually, let's say, taking furniture design, and I'll move to graphic design from there. If you're designing a seating, 60s, 70s, airport was a very simple piece of architecture, right? You're using it to reach there because that's where aircrafts are, and you make your way into aircraft immediately. But today, seating requires people relationship. Post 2021, there will be even larger challenges of what seating means. So as a practice, design was always anyway doing what we call design thinking, but we were not smart enough to coin it.
I want to draw your attention to another sort of philosophical question. We've been hearing a lot about this Make in India business. And one of the things that has always fascinated me is that while we're talking about Make in India, we're not really talking about design in India, right?
We ended up writing a book on deco. It started from, when you present your work, especially in Europe, then, people come to you later on, or in the evening, conferences usually, they take care of speakers. So you meet together and people will, with some hesitancy, come to you and say, what, I really liked your work, but it's not Indian. Once or twice or three times you can ignore it, but then it starts to bother you. I came back to the studio and we had this discussion, guys, this is now bothering me because the fact that we've been practicing for a few years in India, there must be something Indian about it. We came to a conclusion of the sum total of things happening is Indian, and it should not be equal to, it should not be an equation. It's just a sum total of an experience. And we ended up covering around 10 to 11 stories from current practitioners of design in communication design, and we did an interview format, and we thought of doing version 2, version 3, and over a period of time there is some documentation of what happened in India. Lakshmi Murthy in Rajasthan, who's a ceramic designer for 30 years, is working with villagers around her where she's residing in Udaipur district in understanding how do you visualize problems, because people can't read and write. You can't take that and use it elsewhere. What I think is Indian design is wherever you are focusing in that area, there are enough typicalities to learn from instead of using what is in Andhra and using it in Bihar. I think thanks to Steve Jobs and Apple, that there is this passing on and messaging that happened. Okay, that design is important. And I have learned few things from friends working in product design, automobile design. I think the traditional brick and mortar companies were the first ones to actually embrace design. Post 1980s of JVs, when they were over, Swaraj Mazda and Mitsubishi Eicher, or when all these went all their ways, Indian companies were left with, their own production facilities. And then some of our companies actually went there. Mahindra is one example, Tata is one example. Our work in 90s was being done by larger advertising agencies. And most of the communication, if you remember, was campaign based. Unfortunately, nobody was paying attention to branding in India. That's where made in Italy and made in Japan, that tag, changed export markets for these two countries.
Right.
We lost out on that, and but if you see, very quietly but swiftly, the IT sector took over, and today, what we are doing in, let's say, tech startups, some of them are, you can say, design first. In a lighter note, when they're hiring engineers, designers are being hired at the same time, which was very different in early 2000s.
So I would imagine that brand identity and all of this stuff is moving global in that sense. Yeah. So hopefully in the future, this designed in India and made in India will be a tag, or could be a tag, perhaps. I want to bring us to Royal Enfield, obviously one of the most iconic brands. I'm sure you've talked a lot about this. You've given a lot of talks about this. So we're going to try and get you to talk a little bit more about maybe some stuff that you may not have talked about. One of the lines of inquiry of this conversation is, the client, the designer, if the maker is relevant in your case, also some, because I guess when you were making, or when you were looking at prototyping, from buckles to large pieces of signage to stuff that has lighting integrated, so they're makers, and the user, right? I want you to talk us through a little bit about how Royal Enfield came to you. What was, how did you come up with the brief? How are these stakeholders that I just identified for you? How did that conversation come together?
We were contacted with no brief, but we were contacted with that we would like to meet you guys. We knew it's, and at that time, remember, it's an email ID that came from was Aisha Motors. So there was no cue there on what's coming eventually. So we attended a couple of meetings, and on first meeting, I thought it was clear it's to do with Royal Enfield. And I knew that Aisha owns Royal Enfield, but I still kept thinking small. Oh, maybe they need some collateral or some touch points. Second meeting is when we were prepped that we are going to meet Siddharth Lal. Why would Siddharth Lal meet for a brochure or a signage? I have no clue, but let's go and meet. So there were 4 meetings with Siddharth Lal, which was spread over a couple of months. So you were hopeful because something is very right. Something is going in the most proper academic way, that this guy is trying to find a match, and not necessarily the most famous or popular or biggest match. But that word I often use, the match with the right niyat. But he needed somebody who will put their heart into that. Because every time they said next meeting, he wants to see this, and next meeting, and we used to go prep, and we has to have discussion. And I realized that only minor percentage of time slot was used on screen. The rest of it, we were discussing. And it was never about what will you do. It was always about, this is what I'm thinking. By third meeting, I had decided I am not letting this go to the London teams or the New York teams or whoever these guys are talking to. This is it. The kind of prep we used to go with, because there was nothing to show. The only thing you could do was read a lot about the brand. And so slowly chased the thing down. We had our last meeting, and meeting went great. There was no opening of laptops in that meeting. And I was like, oh my God, where is this? If this is the last meeting, what's going to happen? And I remember walking out of the meeting and turning around, and I told Siddharth that just to let you know that I know you're talking to many other studios, but our studio has maximum number of riders, percentage-wise. And you can't beat it. Nobody's studio will have 60% Royal Enfield riders. So we had discussions about where you spent your time in childhood, where were you doing, what school did you? So I figured something is right here.
Right. Right.
And then after a week, we got a call. And the book on design that I was telling you about, the launch of that book is happening in British Council and Goethe Institute, evening time. I had a chair on my head because we had to move chairs to British Council because dinner and drinks were there and reading was there. And I'm crossing that last traffic light, this busy traffic light, and I get a call that congratulations, you have the project. And I'm literally on the road divider, okay, with a chair on my, one of those backrest chairs where you can just.
Right.
I'm the only one standing there. Everyone is walking to the chairs. That was a moment I can't forget.
What were the big moves that you made that characterizes this brand identity, in your words, that one would identify with?
We are always also looking at this. First, we are gathering meaning and editing it out. Which one should sort of go hand in hand with identity, or identity's responsibility on which sort of brand pillars is there. And rest of them will go with retail and how it gets distributed, the load distribution, we call it. One was being aware that a company that was almost bankrupt, early 2000s, and the revival of that as an Indian brand, but not lying about it. It is the product aesthetics, or the root, the foundation is British. The issues with the target audience or the riders, have over a few decades, only a certain age group was associated with it. What was the negative part, and there was basically a bullet point list made. One is that we are going to go global. There is no provenance of India making motorcycles. But the fact that we are not really changing the product as such, and then the brand moving its sort of R&D into Britain. So when we are changing the identity, we ensure that it inherently should reflect Britishness of design. Let me quote unquote that. And we need to also this rugged image that the product had, the new products don't have, because we had access to products which people saw much later. Third was the portfolio is no more limited to heaviness. The first thing that comes to your mind when you see new products, it's not the heaviness, but lifestyle. You can start thinking of a lifestyle, or I can connect with it. So these were the challenges put on table for identity. That you can't.
It's like a functional brief, right? Like
functional brief.
This is what we want to achieve. While
yeah.
You've understood what meaning has to be visualized, this is what we want to achieve now.
Achieve that. Yeah. So those things are one thing we literally put it on softboards for every team member to see. Never forget this, especially for brands like these, where your own biases and your experience is going to fight with the new reality. You're now bringing in the part that the design research showed, and the process of Santosh's, magical output that was pure motorcycling. So now you have these, you basically start weighing in all the vectors that will start defining. And then you sit and also consciously say, once in a while, forget all these. What do you want to do? Because there is this tightrope that you always walk between the form and the art part, and they need to just, if you're very lucky, they will meet at the right point.
Yeah, and in a way they will sing, and it'll make music, and it's not noise.
And you won't know which one is what. The exercise became, now, guys, forget everything. When you see it, these zero down options, what comes to your mind? Because that's how the end user is going to see. They don't have a brochure of meaning behind this.
Correct.
And the dilemma is you can't show it outside studio. And the day the word came, flow. There is flow in this. And that's when we turned around and we said, I think we can now tell the client that there is a date. We surprised ourselves with the flow, because that's when I realized we have broken our bias of this brand. One thing that I would definitely like to go back and come up with a more agile system of deployment. Because when we were designing for Royal Enfield in 2012, and of course we revised it in a couple of years' time, but I think it requires another revision, is they were not producing that much communication because there were only 3 to 4 bikes. Today, the portfolio is more. Now, each motorcycle has a different team behind it. And, sometimes the agencies can be different. I would like to revisit our learnings from tech space. There is a much more intelligent back end at work, because it is very important to get some feedback on design's performance. The majority of your effort is to output that piece of communication, right, rather than thinking through it. And the approvals mechanisms are can be quite at odds with the flow of creativity. So when I say rapid deployment, you also deploy the briefing and approval processes.
Yeah.
So that the agency, if we can give agency half an hour more by a more efficient system, that will affect things like that. So we also want the subsequent agencies who are working today also can spend some time crafting that flow, or at least, to ensuring that there is the Royal Enfield-ness in that piece of communication.